What's up guys, Bandit here. Have you ever been just adventuring across Hyrule, doing normal stuff, picking up herbs, oh look, a chicken nugget, killing bokoblins, and generally having a good time when you come across a giant skull sitting in the middle of mud? Well, that's what this video is all about.
The Bottomless Swamp is the area in question, and there are so many weird things going on here that for over 4 years now, there really hasn't been a theory made on it, leaving several huge questions unanswered, such as, is it a real skull? Why is it here? And where did it come from? Well, let's start by pointing out all this weird stuff, and then we'll come to a conclusion based on what we find. As previously mentioned, the skull is sitting in the middle of mud, the likes of which neither Link nor the monsters in the area can swim in. And speaking of monsters, the skull is filled with them and acts as a large bokoblin camp. There are the weird limestone-esque rocks jutting out along the sides of the mud pool. There are a bunch of dead trees in the area. And there are incomplete skull rock carvings halfway down the hill, one of which has a loner low-level bokoblin just sitting inside, and the other of which has a beam through its eye for some reason. And the weirdest of all this really weird stuff is the fact that it's surrounded by Ganon's malice. But yet, even though there's so much going on here, strangely, there's no Sheikah Shrine present. Whew. Lots to unpack here for sure. But let's start with the most obvious of them all, the skull itself. The material used for the skull is pretty interesting, as you can see from these screenshots taken at the same time of day, one being the giant skull and the other being one of the bokoblin camp skulls located halfway down the hill. The material used for the giant skull has a different crack pattern to it and is a slightly different color. Also, within the cracks on the surface of the giant skull, you can see that the inside of the skull is actually a little bit lighter and a little bit warmer of a color than what's on the surface. This is also visible from the parts of the skull that are broken, like the broken horn sitting in the mud. This material is completely unique to the giant skull and does not appear anywhere else in the game. So the immediate question we have to ask is this giant skull made of rock, or is it actual bone? Now, there's actually a very simple way to answer this question that previously I didn't really think about doing, but have since been enlightened. If we comb through the game's object file names, like I did with this map by Mr. Cheese that took forever because there's no area search option, meaning I had to guess names one by one until coming across the right one, we can actually see the name of the giant skull object. It's listed as FLDOBJ underscore enemy base rock underscore A underscore 01. Clearly, the developers of Breath of the Wild knew that this was a rock, so we already have an easy answer for that question that immediately removes any speculations about monsters from times past that the skull could have come from. Admittedly, it's a little disappointing. However, we still have plenty of questions that need answers, even if the giant skull isn't an actual skull. If this giant skull is in fact made of rock, then what rock was it made from? As I detailed more in a previous video about the Breach of Demise, I personally believe that this jutting yellowish rock that only appears in a few places of the game is a kind of limestone or other sedimentary rock that oftentimes formulates underneath the surface of the ground. For these rock shards to be exposed like this and the giant skull to be located in the middle of them, I think the answer is staring us in the face. It was carved from this limestone-ish rock right here, giving a reason for the lighter color on the inside. As for who carved the skull out of the rock, I think that answer is also pretty obvious. I mean, it is filled with members of Ganon's army, so probably them. Bokoblins are also well known for having carved out the bokoblin camp skulls, which is what I believe this low-level loner down here was doing before, being killed by Link. The pool of mud that formed around the giant skull probably did so because of the crater-like shape left in the ground as a result of all the carving. In fact, if we test the depth of this mud pool in-game using magnesis to lower a metallic object into it, we can actually see that it's not bottomless at all. It's maybe 15 to 20 feet deep at the most. And the result of this shallow, dirt and debris-filled rainwater basin is a bunch of mud that's just too thick to swim in. And because everything in this area that we can see today would have been essentially created by Ganon's monsters, that would explain why there's no shrine in the area, as the entire hillside that we see today didn't really exist like this back when the Sheikah created all that Sheikah stuff. Now, on to the biggest question of this entire theory. Why? Why did these blins randomly decide to make a big, scary, giant monster skull when their other, smaller, scary giant skulls have worked just fine for the rest of them across Hyrule? The answer, I believe, lies in a nearby goopy substance, and I don't mean the mud. You see, strangely, as I pointed out earlier, Ganon's malice is abundant in this area. Right beside the mud pool and on a lot of the limestone actually. Most fans are very familiar with this substance by now, and one thing that most people agree on regarding malice is the fact that it is most likely sentient or an extension of Ganon's will. This is proven by several things, such as the fact that we can see eyes in the malice that can search out and attack Link, or the fact that it uses its more solidified portions to block out important passageways from the hero that it must have deduced were important. And of course there is the fact that it can possess and control the Sheikah technologies and inanimate skeletons of deceased enemies. Because of this, we can assume that malice is where malice wants to be, where it chooses to be, and it's choosing to be right here, right beside this random giant monster rock carving of a skull. And after thinking through countless possibilities, I would like to present to you the most possible explanation in my opinion. What if the Blins were commanded by Ganon to construct a giant stall monster for Ganon to possess using his malice? According to Creating a Champion, the form of Calamity Ganon we fight at the end of the game had only begun to be created after Link woke up in the present day. So are we really supposed to believe that Ganon just sat still with Zelda for the past 100 years without a single backup plan, all the way until Link resurrected? I mean, technically his ultimate plan to unleash the power of the Sheikah to take over the world kind of failed 100 years ago when Zelda discovered she could just poof them away at will. So what if Ganon concocted a different plan? One that enabled him to complete his destruction of Hyrule as a giant monster while Zelda was busy keeping his main consciousness sealed in the castle. I don't think the fact that the giant skull is made of rock is much of a problem for this theory. We can clearly see at other points in the franchise that inanimate objects are more than capable of being possessed. So I am completely positive that Ganon has the power to possess an inanimate object such as a carved rock monster fossil if he wanted to. One last thing to point out about this theory though would be something specific that Zelda says in the English version of the game that many fans have taken a huge issue with. After Calamity Ganon is defeated at the hands of Link, he rematerializes as Dark Beast Ganon out in Hyrule Field. While we are watching this happen, Zelda says that he has given up on reincarnation and assumed his pure enraged form. The reason why fans hate this segment of dialogue so much is that it pretty much differentiates entirely from the Japanese version of the game, which roughly translates to Zelda saying instead that this form was born from his obsessive refusal to give up on revival. The clear discrepancy between the two versions of what is supposed to be the same piece of dialogue is at first glance just a huge mistake on the English translation's part. But wait, back up. Seriously? You're telling me that in 2017, the biggest Zelda game of all time with the biggest budget of all time was released with a glaring mistake that was written, reviewed, and voice acted in what is probably the most climactic experience of the entire game? I mean, I guess it's possible, but what if it's not so much that it's just blatantly incorrect, but rather that it's referring to something the Japanese version was not? If you think about it, it's a bit strange to say right after Link literally beats this incarnation of Calamity Ganon to death, that Ganon gave up on reincarnation. He was defeated actually, which is why the Japanese version just essentially says that he refuses to die. So what if the English version is referring to the giant monster skull that Ganon was trying to use as his next incarnation? What if it was almost ready and his malice was moving into position for possession, but before his plan could fully come to fruition, a hero decided to awaken, foiling his plans and forcing Ganon to give up on reincarnation? Of course, this is just my theory though. What do you guys think? Was the unexplained giant rock skull in the middle of the not so bottomless swamp being crafted for Ganon's possession in his period of not doing anything else for 100 years? Or is it still an enigma, forever unexplained until further notice? Let me know in the comments below.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. If you would be so kind as to leave a like below on this video, it would greatly assist in getting this video spread around to fans just like you and me. And hey, with E3 literally next month, we need to start building that hype. And speaking of which, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, so that you can stick around for all that content to come next month and beyond. Huge thanks to my Bandit crew, of which I have a new Masked Bandit level supporter to announce. Say hello to James W, who just joined at the top level. James, seriously, thank you. And more hellos go to Bobo and Tyrell G, who have also generously joined up with my elite crew. If you watching are interested in being a part of my community and helping these videos come to life, feel free to check out that blue join button located below, or the links to my Patreon and merch pages in the description below. Also down there are the links to my social media pages, so please come follow me there if you want updates on The real life Ganon. Yes, I named him Ganon. That's all I've got for you in this one, so as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. This is MaskedNintendoBandit, looking forward to seeing you in the next one, and signing out. Peace!